There's such a power and such a magical feeling about having a community and feeling like you belong.
Right? I mean, that's such an important lesson for all of us to take in whatever our pursuits are, whatever we're doing, is when we believe in something, we need to build community around it.
Community is something that we all will thrive in if we find the right people to be with.
If it's done this for you, imagine what it can do for others. Okay, friends, today I am going to release a bonus episode because it was so good. I can't wait to share it with everybody. So we're going to speed it through the process and get it out to you. I interview a person named Kay Rodriguez, and she hits my heartstrings like nobody else. She started an app called Outerly. It's about building community and getting people outside so they can be happy, healthy, contributing humans to this world. So listen in, invest, support this cause. I am so excited. Without any more further ado, here's a little bit more on Kay and her program, Outerly. Friends, today I have Kay Rodriguez on the podcast. We met on LinkedIn. I love LinkedIn because she's doing awesome things. And somehow she came up in my feed and I started going down the rabbit hole of all things her. And I was like, this is a person I want on my podcast. She so kindly agreed. So Kay, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Jen, for having me.
I know. It's so awesome. You're doing this cool thing. So I know we should do like the evolution of where you are, but I want to start. You're developing an app called Outerly. Tell us about this app and then we'll get into the history.
Yeah. Outerly is a social discovery platform for the outdoors. And really what we hope to do is help people do two things. The first is find outdoor activities to participate in the area where they live locally. And then second is to connect them with other people who want to do the same activities as they do.
Outdoor made easy. Activities made easy. I know, like when you go to a new town too, and you're like, hey, I want to go on this hike, but I don't really know it. And was there going to be something I'm sure of? It would be really nice. Like a meetup, right? So is this kind of meetup meets outdoor activities?
Yeah, a lot of the times the way we put it very simply is it's like AllTrails meets Meetup. So think having a database, a map full of activities, and then being able to see all of the people in your network and in their networks who want to do the same activities as you.
Okay. All right. So we already wrapped this up. I know because this is a question in the back of my mind. You have the Gaia app, you have the AllTrails app. Now you have this Outerly app. So explain to us your differentiator.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of the competitors in the outdoor discovery space are really focused on finding activities. And I think that's fantastic because when we did our customer research late last year, we learned that there were two main barriers that prevent a lot of people from going outdoors as much as they want to. And the first was finding outdoor activities near them. And I think that problem actually is being solved in a really robust way by a lot of different players. However, the second piece that we discovered was a big barrier to outdoor participation is the ability to find other people to go outside with. And so rewinding a little bit, I was running a company called Urban Outdoors. It was a publication for outdoor activities in cities, about 40 cities in the US and Canada. And we would get emails every single week from people saying, I want to do the activities you're writing about, but I don't know anybody who will go with me. How can I meet other people to go outside with? And so as we did our customer interviews and our surveys and things like that, we learned that actually 75% of people do not go outside as often as they would like to because they can't easily find somebody else to go with. And that's why with Outerly, we decided to layer in the social component and make our company actually community first and community oriented with the database of local activities as a facilitator of those types of connections rather than the database, being the pinnacle of the entire product.
I like it. And everything right now is focused on community, because we're interrelated people, right? Like we like to do things with people and things are less intimidating when there's another human that's participating with us.
Yes, absolutely. Moreover, there's a huge loneliness epidemic. Vivek Murthy, former Surgeon General of the US, has talked about this quite a bit. I read one of his books called Together, and it talks about the public health implications of the loneliness epidemic. So we've got the loneliness epidemic going on. We've got a huge mental health crisis going on following the pandemic and even preceding it. And so, what is one of the best ways to make people feel better and to give them more agency? A, getting them out in nature more often, which is a grounding and mindful experience for them. B, connecting them with other like minded people so they don't feel so lonely, so they feel like they belong somewhere. And by creating the sense of belonging and community in our nature spaces, we hope to help do our part to improve what we can in urban mental health.
Yeah, no, I like this. And like you speak a little bit about mental health, and this came to you at some level because you struggled with it yourself. So bring us back to like that time in your life and what was going on that allowed you to fast forward to today.
That's absolutely correct, Jen. I have struggled with mental health almost my whole life, but there is one specific era where it got so bad that I eventually ended up having to be in the hospital. I just moved to a new city, Chicago. I didn't know anybody there. I was at the time with a partner who was working in the emergency room as a first year resident intern, and I never saw him. And so it started to get darker and darker in Chicago. I didn't really feel like I had a community there. I wasn't going outside regularly because there wasn't a lot of documentation on where to go in the Chicagoland area. And so I reached a point where I felt so in the dark, so isolated and in the dark and low. And I would try to grasp for a glimpse of the future and I couldn't see it. And I know that a lot of people have been in this type of situation before where the depression just clouds every degree of your vision. And so I ended up having to go to the hospital for about 2 weeks. This was right at the end of 2019. And thereafter took a few months off of work to recover because depression really destroys your energy, makes it hard to focus, makes it impossible to get up and go to work most days. And so I took some time off of work, joined a PHP or partial hospitalization program where I was working to recover for 8 hours a day, 7 days a week. And when I was home during that recovery period, I would just stay on the couch. I'd sit on the couch. Some days I couldn't get up to brush my teeth. And it was such a painful experience and such a heavy and daunting experience for me. And so one day, the sun was shining through my big window in my Chicago apartment, and I said, "Well, I'm laying here on the couch anyway. What if I just walked across the street and laid in the park instead?" And so I grabbed my hammock, set it up between two trees in the urban park across the street from me, and I did exactly what I did at home in my depression. I went there, I laid down, and I did nothing. But being outside in that state hit completely differently. And so instead of being in a dark room with blankets on top of me, not really engaging with anything, I looked up and saw the clouds moving in the sky. I heard the leaves rustling around me. I heard kids playing soccer in the field next to me and birds chirping in the trees. This was early in the year in Chicago, so there weren't that many birds, but there were a few. It reminded me that there was a world outside of the cloud of depression I'd been living in for many, many months. And so that one experience turned into a weekly experience, and that weekly experience turned into every other day. It went from sitting in a hammock to inviting a friend to the park with me. It went from inviting friends to the park with me to hiking. And sooner or later, I realized I was going outside every single day and I was recovering. I was seeing the world again with a new set of eyes that I had forgotten about, and felt feelings that I hadn't been in touch with, feelings of wonder and awe and connection that I hadn't been in touch with for so long. And today, looking back on it, easily I can say that my time in nature and the connections that I made with other people in those spaces saved my life. I would not be here today without having that experience and incorporating that into my daily life.
Yeah. I have goosebumps. Like I have goosebumps on my arms listening to this story. No, I think outdoor time and just that fresh air and just the sunlight and just all the things that are going on outside of us remind us how little we are but how important we still are. Like, it's just this weird dichotomy of just being, this is it. This is life. I can do what I have choice. I can participate. I can do this stuff. Okay. So the interesting thing about your story is that like COVID hits shortly after you're recovering from all of this. So how are you handling that?
Yeah, COVID was an interesting one in Chicago because obviously the entire city shut down. All of our green spaces were closed. We weren't allowed to be on the lakefront. And on top of that, there were a lot of movements going on in Chicago, riots, protests, things like that throughout the year of 2020. And it was a really interesting time to be in the city. But one of the things that I learned and that this whole experience taught me is that the outdoors is more than just summiting a giant mountain or going to a national park, which many of them were closed in the beginning of COVID, and travel obviously wasn't a possibility. And so this little park, this just block, you know, 1 block by 1 block park across the street from me, surrounded by buildings, became my oasis. And that was my outdoors. And that may not have been what I would have considered outdoorsy, in air quotes, before this whole experience happened. But afterward, when the whole world was closed down, that was the place where I found the most peace. And so it really helped me shift how I define what an outdoor activity is or what time in nature is. It doesn't have to be some grand planned experience. It can absolutely also be crossing the street to a tree lined area and just sitting under the trees for a few minutes.
Oh no, I was just in New York on some interviews and doing some stuff. And I'm in these huge, I mean, you're in a concrete jungle at the best as I can describe it. And I looked at my map. I'm like, we need to find a tree. Like, I need a tree. I don't care. I need a real tree. So we like looked on the map and we were a couple of blocks over and there's a park. And, you know, I live in Park City where the whole town is a park, which is probably why it's called Park City. There was this like not even the whole block, just this sliver of a triangle had probably 5 trees just standing next to a tree for 5 minutes. I'm like, okay, I'm okay. I just needed to be away from the world, even though it's buzzing, screaming, lighting, all this kind of stuff all around you. It helps. Like the tiniest little thing helps.
Yes. And I think the more that we can actually incorporate nature in tiny ways like that, the better we'll feel and the more connected to nature we'll feel. I know there's been for a long time this idea that nature is only in certain places or nature is separate from cities, but that's absolutely not the case, especially in the story that you just shared. You can find spaces in cities, you can find spaces near you, but that hasn't always been the framing of nature and outdoors. And I think even just going and touching a tree or standing underneath them and looking at the leaves, it's such a magical experience and a source of joy, and one that I think everybody can benefit from.
Oh, I'm on your page, which is why we're on this podcast together for sure. Okay, so you start realizing the connection to nature, you start self-healing and putting yourself back together. Congratulations. That's a huge lift for any of us. The magazine that you were part of, was this prior or to after?
This was during. So yeah, I moved to Chicago after spending a year abroad, a career gap, where I was traveling solo all over the world. And when I moved to Chicago, when I would meet people, I'd ask them, where can I go for a hike in this city? And most people, even Chicago natives, didn't have a good answer for me. They said, this is not Colorado. We don't really do that stuff here. I don't know. You might be able to go to the Upper Peninsula in Michigan and find some stuff. And I was like, no, I want an hour on a Saturday to go out in the woods somewhere and just be in nature. And there weren't a lot of people who could tell me where to go. And so I went on Google Maps, I looked at all the little green patches, and I made a list of parks and trails and preserves that I wanted to go see. And what I learned is that Chicago actually has a lot of beautiful parks and recreation areas, and they're not very well known. And so I made a WordPress website. I posted a few articles on the places that I went. And within 3 months, we had about 15,000 people coming to read those articles every single month. Yeah. This is in January and February of 2020. So the news is ominous. It's winter in Chicago, so not a time people are generally outside at all. And yet people are reading about where to go hiking, where to go see nature in the Chicago area. And so I said, well, if Chicago wants this, then I bet every city wants this. And so we continued to test with DC and Houston content places I lived before. And then as the pandemic started to unfold, our traffic started to skyrocket. We expanded to different cities. I quit my full-time job, moved into a camper van and drove around the country exploring different cities and where to go outside in them. Fast forward a couple of years and we ended up having anywhere from 200 to 250,000 unique visitors to that website per month. And it was my full-time job. I built this company from zero all the way to a huge hundreds of thousands of people every month. And I realized that nature access in cities is a huge gap in the market. And so now it's called Urban Outdoors. It still exists. And it was really the jet fuel that I needed to validate the problem that eventually led me to working on Outerly.
Okay. So now do you still own the business, the urban website stuff?
I still own it. It is not managed by me anymore because I have shifted my personal focus completely to building Outerly. But you can still find it in most cities that you would visit here in the US or Canada. And we're still keeping that content alive. Eventually, our vision for that is actually to integrate it with the Outerly platform. So to use that content and those articles to drive people to find even more activities and ideas on our actual platform.
Yeah. And now before we jumped on this episode, we were briefly talking about how you just did a test run in DC for the Outerly app with 300-ish people. What kind of activities were people suggesting, participating in, interested in?
Yeah, there were all kinds of activities actually, ranging from technically it's indoors, but climbing in gyms, climbing outdoors, paddling is big here in DC because there are a lot of waterways in the area, including 2 rivers here in DC proper. There was a ton of hiking, walking, etc. And then we also learned that people like even lower impact activities as outdoor activities, things like community gardens, dog parks, bird watching, things like that. And so we don't actually limit what activities we have on the platform. We just let our people tell us what they want. And so we're continuously iterating on our database, continuously growing it, and really focus on this like human powered outdoor recreation niche.
This is so good. I'm like all excited about this at so many levels because even I can get very narrow minded on what it means to be outdoors. Right? Like I think it's a human tendency to start narrowing and filing things down, that to like pause and just say, hey, I mean, I'll be honest, I actually was training for Everest and I could do this step up in my basement. And then I'm like, why am I doing this in my basement? I brought it outside and I would do it at my son's soccer practice, but then I would do it outside like all the time just because it's nicer to be outside. There's more things to look at and absorb and take in and all that kind of stuff.
It's beautiful how even just shifting your indoor activities to outdoors can have a huge impact on your mental health for the rest of the entire day. For an example, even just this morning, I took 3 or 4 meetings outside while walking because I didn't need to be at my computer. They were more conversational meetings. Whenever somebody logged on to the meeting, they'd be like, oh, it looks like you're in such a beautiful place. I'm so jealous. I'm like, you could be here too. So, so I just try to find ways to incorporate the outdoors, much like you were saying, into the activities I'm already doing.
Right. So Outerly is still in its beta phase, and you guys are doing a crowdfunding or Kickstart project. What one is it?
It's on WeFunder. It's an equity crowdfund raise, and we are getting investments from our community. We are a community built, driven, and now owned company. And we wanted to give the people who believed in us earliest the opportunity to own a piece of what we're doing and grow that investment with us as we scale across the country and across the world.
Across the world. See, you're such a big thinker. I love this. It's because you spent a year traveling the world and your gap year between careers. It like makes everything. I take my kids all over the world to travel. and be like, well, why don't you just take them around the United States? Like, I want them to see different ways of doing life. I want them to see different cultures or different things. It's not necessarily so much the landscape. It's just there's a different way of waking up than what we are conditioned to do here. And so I love that you're taking this beyond our borders. I think that's fantastic.
Absolutely. And if there's one thing that my travels have taught me is that culturally, linguistically, kind of logistically, countries can look very, very different from each other, but humans are all pretty similar. And we're all driven by the same human like want to be connected to each other and to be connected to the world around us. And so I'm really excited to eventually get to the point where we can expand globally, because we don't limit this outdoor community to my home and your home. We get to give that community to the entire world, or provide a platform for the entire world to participate in that community. And I think regardless of where you live, the outdoors has incredible benefits for every single person.
Oh, 1,000%. And so when the people are involved in the app, are they helping with the user generated content then and saying like, here's what's to do here, or here's what to do here, or I want to go hike this hike. Anybody wants to, or meeting tomorrow at 9? Is that the concept?
Yep, that's exactly the concept. So imagine if you could see an information page about any activity similar to an AllTrails or a Gaia, but you could also see, you could save that activity for later. And then after you save it, you could see all of your friends and friends of friends who also have saved that activity for later. You can see any events that are going on at that location that you can join as an individual or in a group. And you also get to see all of your friends' reviews first. So it's really, it develops trust not only from the information that's already on the page, but also from the people that you know who've been there and who have experienced it. And so we just want to make doing outdoor activities and talking about the outdoors as social as possible, and be a platform that facilitates those conversations and those conversions into from, hey, I want to go do this thing, to, hey, I'm actually out doing this thing with some really cool people that I met through the platform.
Oh my goodness. This is so good. Okay. So what has been a surprising hurdle thus far that you didn't expect?
Oh gosh. I recently have been in a little bit of a rabbit hole about one of my favorite founders, Melanie Perkins from Canva. And in her story, she talks about how she went to VCs early in the days of Canva to pitch them, and she got hundreds of rejections. And given that we faced a similar situation when we went to go raise our first round of funding. Given that we had already built Urban Outdoors, I had built it from scratch and been able to generate hundreds of thousands of unique visitors per month, I said, this is a pretty strong case for what we want to do with Outerly. I took that to hundreds of VCs late last year and got hundreds of rejections. And it was an incredibly painful experience. So much so that I ended up in a state of burnout that really had me questioning if I wanted to move forward with the company at all. And so in maybe February or March of this year, I said, I'm going to give this one more shot, and I'm going to let our community help. And so what that turned into was I posted very vulnerably on LinkedIn, as you have seen. A bunch of people approached me and they said, hey, I'm not a VC, but I'm willing to help you with strategy or finance or design or software development. And you don't have to pay me. I just really want to see this product exist. And I said, I feel very guilty about not paying you. I don't want to take advantage of you. And they said, no, this resonates with me so deeply that I want to contribute back to what you're doing. And I want to help build this thing with you. And so fast forward to today, we have about 60 people in a Slack group that range from satellite engineers and software developers all the way to fine artists and illustrators, and everything in between, from strategy, marketing, operations, finance, that help just a few minutes or a few hours every week. And so I don't have any full-time employees, but I have a team of 60 non-employees, who really have rallied around this mission and who have brought it to life. And I would say, like, I would not be on this podcast right now. Outerly probably wouldn't even exist today if I didn't have that level of community. Moreover, moving into this fundraising round, we said, forget VCs. Let's let the community decide and put their votes in for us financially and own a stake in our company and have skin in the game for our success. And I really wanted to use the WeFunder as a test, the crowdfunding round as a test to see if people would bite. And in less than 2 weeks, we have raised $32,000 and from 91 different investors. And we are closing in on about 30% committed in our round. So it has been such an eye-opening experience to see how the community, the people whose problems this app is solving, have rallied around what we are trying to do, to the point where they will give their time, they will give their dollars, invest their dollars, and really start share with their communities why this is important to them and why they want to see it exist.
No, so much of your story hits on so many amazing points that I'm going to just regurgitate some of it for the people that are listening. One, taking mentorship from people. You don't even have to know them. If you know their story, that gives you courage and hope in your pursuits. So I think it's so important for us to share our stories, because no matter where we are on the journey, it allows other people to participate. I talk about in the book that I have coming out, Quit Proof, I talk about how we need to wave our flag on our entire pursuit. It's really fun to wave our flag at the top of the mountain, but we need to wave our flag where it's I am about to quit, or I need this, or I need that, because that flag lets other people know where you are. It lets them know hey, I can participate like this, or if you're over there, maybe you can help me with this and we can work together to make this thing happen, which I think is amazing and something that you've been doing, obviously. Otherwise, you wouldn't be in the situation that you are today with your team of 60. And then the fact that you took the Canva story and said, okay, she got a bazillion rejections, I got a bazillion rejections. That doesn't mean no. That means stop, get myself into a good space again, give it another rodeo try, and let it look a little bit differently than what you originally thought, right? I mean, that's such an important lesson for all of us to take in whatever our pursuits are, whatever we're doing, is when we believe in something, we need to build community around it. And that community reminds us of why we're doing it, what we're doing, because no one's on 100% of the time. I mean, I wish I was. I'm on 99.9% of the time if you ask anybody that's around me. But I also need the energy from the collective to keep that fuel going. And so I think it's so cool that you figured out a way to recharge your batteries and to continue. Because this app is I cannot wait to share this story and to make sure people learn about it, because this is important. This is needed. Look what it's done for you. If it's done this for you, imagine what it can do for others.
Yeah, there's such a power and such a magical feeling about having a community and feeling like you belong. And that's what our brain trust has done for us. That's what every conversation that I've had like this one has done for me, is just reinforce my belief that community is everything, and that community is something that we all will thrive in if we find the right people to be with.
Yeah. I mean, I climbed Everest, and I only was able to climb that mountain because of the community behind me. The community that stepped in ways that you don't see at the photo. But if you could see how many people were involved in that pursuit, we wouldn't fit in on a photo. There's that many people that made it possible. And I know you're going to have that photo someday yourself. And there's going to be so many people to put in this journey. They're not going to fit in the photo. It's going to be crazy. Okay, so how do we find you? How do we find and invest in all the different details?
Yes, you can find me on LinkedIn. I post very regularly about the updates from the company, the updates in my personal story. It's just Kay Rodriguez. And then in terms of looking at Outerly and joining our waitlist, we are at Outerly, outerly.co. And then if you'd like to invest in our WeFunder, read our pitch, learn more about the business that we're building, you can find us at wefunder.com/outerly.
Woo! Friends, get in this investment. Like, it's a good one. I'm a fan. Thank you so much for your time today, Kay.
Thank you, Jen.